Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 22nd of August. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that easily by calling us at 1-800-472-0391. You also find us online anytime, weather.gov/Alaska. And if you haven't tried this out recently, or maybe you've tried it out and didn't like what you saw a while ago, make sure you check again. Weather.gov/Alaska is on your mobile device. You can access your local forecast information very easily by going to mobile.weather.gov. And you'll get a search bar at the top. Simply type in your village name, let's say Bethel, Alaska, or AK. And once you save that to your home screen, you'll be able to get your local forecast and any watches, warnings, or advisories, as well as satellite and radar pictures very quickly and in a low bandwidth style. So make sure you check that out. Weather.gov on mobile devices. That's mobile.weather.gov. And if you can't find what you're looking for, whether it's got to do with anything on our website, the product that you're normally looking at, on perhaps your fax, let me know. david.snider@noaa.gov. I'm happy to help you in any way I can. Here's what we see is shaping up across the region for the next 24 hours or more now. We're kind of into about halfway through our 48-hour flood outlook that we were talking about yesterday, with flooding impacts around the eastern end of the Kenai Peninsula, the Kenai Fjords region into Prince William Sound, and the northern Gulf. We've had an excessive amount of rain. One place hit hard has been Cordova, around Eak Lake in particular. A lot of roads there, seeing a lot of runoff thanks to probably 5, 6, maybe 8 to 10 inches of rain across some places in the region. So no surprise that we're having issues there. Prince William Sound, certainly one of the wettest spots in the entire planet. But even places like Cordova can have a little bit of an issue when all the rain comes down in that one spot and it's over your town. So don't be surprised if there's some significant rises still on some of the local streams and rivers, and maybe some minor flooding in the region. After that, though, most of the region looks to be out from underneath the fire hose that has been streaming right into the northern Gulf, and particularly right around Cordova. You can always check out more information like this by going to weather.gov/APRFC. That's short for the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. A flood advisory is in effect through the early evening hours, late afternoon, 5 o'clock today. That does not look like we're going to extend that at this point. So flooding concerns will begin to get better, but probably still be at least a nuisance across some parts of the region. Hopefully nothing more than that around Cordova, but flood advisory until 5 o'clock for your Wednesday there. As we go ahead in time and look at the fire danger, it doesn't look like a whole lot of concern for most of Alaska, but you're noticing some drier weather up here around Point Lay and just southwest of Wainwright as you get north of the Brooks Range. The concerns we were watching yesterday around the upper Yukon Valley have pretty much washed out. Rainfall there and higher humidity is a result of, or has improved some of the weather there, and we'll continue to see that for the foreseeable future, really. A very wet weather pattern across most of Alaska, and what we're talking about northern parts of southeast, all but done. And any time now, it looks like we will not be talking about fire weather concerns across south central or southwest. So we turn our attention to the satellite picture here, and you can see a wave of moisture working into southwestern Alaska, across the central and western Bering Sea, also looking at another circulation just kind of hovering out there. The most recent wave is working its way through the central and eastern part of the interior, and what was left of the rain that was really hammering Cordova is spreading out across southeast, a gentle light rain for most areas there. As we go through the loop one more time, you'll notice that we don't really have a whole lot of activity across south central Alaska. But in the coming days, we're going to fill this back in. Wave after wave after wave is lining up across the North Pacific, stretching all the way into the West Pacific, surrounding several typhoons. And of course, we're going to keep track of Hurricane Lane as it's passing near Hawaii, starting at tonight and going through the next 2 to 3 days there. So a serious situation there in some of your favorite places on the planet, of course, for many Alaskans. Here's a look at today's weather. Low pressure sitting across the Bering at 991 millibars shows The boundary moving up towards St. Lawrence Island. Clouds were filling in this afternoon there, south and west. Rainfall starting to spread inland even more into Norton Sound. Nome all the way up towards Selawik and eastward up the Yukon Valley. Areas of light rain just west of Cook Inlet, also across the Alaska Range, but a nice chunk of drier air across Cook Inlet all the way down toward Kodiak Island. Brief area of high pressure helping to make that possible, but it will be fleeting and short. Low pressure across the Yukon, also creating some areas of light rain for most of the central and northern parts of southeast. And you can't see it very well under the banner, but there is high pressure here. Underneath that, an easterly flow, and underneath that, trapped low deck of clouds and stratus and fog showing up for most of the north slope. Now, as this boundary moves eastward, we'll probably get some clearing in places like Arctic Valley, or Arctic Village, I should say, for a few, maybe hours. And then as we get into the early morning hours of tomorrow, fog will be a little bit more likely. There won't be surprised to see fog around Cook Inlet and parts of southeast. Most of that should be generally light fog, and that's a super dense fog, but don't be surprised to have that interrupt your travel if you're moving around tonight. Low pressure around Kodiak Island, 1,012 millibars, also stirring up more rainfall ahead of that. Some of that will be drizzly and light behind it, a better chance for some showers. And then our trough of low pressure really in the same old place where our front was found just earlier today at 994 millibars there. Really not a whole lot of change across the central and western change. Small craft advisories at this point at best. By tomorrow afternoon, this is not a mistake. Low pressure across the interior has the opportunity to create some shower and thunderstorm activity across areas north of the Alaska Range, generally over the Tanana Valley, and south of the Yukon. So in the Fairbanks region, it wouldn't be a shock to hear a little bit of thunder and lightning, and pardon the pun there. Low pressure just west of Kodiak Island, 1,010 millibars, will be sweeping another push of rain across the eastern Gulf. A brief break in the clouds like what we saw over south central today. That will move through, and then another round of rain will follow that. Across the west, Seward Peninsula, the YK Delta into Bristol Bay, showers there, spotty showers across the Gulf, across the Bering Sea near St. Paul and St. George. And then here's yet another impulse of rainfall moving out of the North Pacific at 997 millibars. And that tracks northward and strengthens a little bit and sends a wave of rainfall spreading eastward into some of that drier weather we're seeing across the Gulf. And it looks like this one will have a little more wind with it for the central and eastern chain there, so don't be surprised to see small crafts get a little bit worse as we get into Thursday and Friday. High pressure sitting across south central may interrupt the rain briefly on Friday, but it won't be a nice long break probably like what we're experiencing on this Wednesday. For southeast, periods of rainfall fill back in from north to south, so it looks like another soggy period there. What happens to our thunderstorms? Well, that risk gets a lot more isolated as we get into Friday for the upper Yukon. Areas around Eagle, perhaps down toward Northway. An isolated shower or thunderstorm may be possible, but certainly not as widespread as what we were looking at on Thursday. Low pressure shifts a little bit further north, and you can see clouds breaking up across the north slope. You can also see a little bit of rainfall, maybe even mixing in with frozen precipitation across the north. It wouldn't be a shocker to see enough cold air move in just to change over a few of those raindrops to maybe some snowflakes for this time of the year, very close to the coast and certainly over the ice. As we look at your low temperatures for your Thursday morning, temps will be cold enough to see some freezing, areas going sub-freezing for Utqiagvik all the way out toward Kaktovik, and very close to it for Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, Atkasuk, and down toward Wainwright. But you can see there's still considerable amount of warm air or milder autumn air, let's say, across the middle interior and the west coast. Most areas will stay in the upper 40s and lower 50s. Around Bristol Bay, all the way out toward Kodiak, about 50 degrees. St. Paul, 48, about the same for Adak and Atka, Shemya, and southeast in the lower to mid-50s there. Ketchikan and Annette still pleasantly mild. The same goes for south central. Talkeetna, about 51. Fairbanks, closer to 46. High temperatures on Thursday should stretch into the upper 50s and lower 60s for southeast. Looks like a beautiful day temperature-wise. South central should also be fairly mild, upper 50s and lower 60s there. Golcana and places out toward Glen Allen, all the way up toward the Denali Highway. Beautiful weather there temperature-wise, but again, there's a really good chance you're going to be wet if you're going out to walk in the woods for a little while. Looking at 55 degrees around Fort Yukon, 30s and 40s for the north slope. Kotzebue Sound temperatures in the mid-50s. Galena looking at nearly 60 degrees for your Thursday afternoon. Yukon territory or the Yukon East, probably looking at temperatures in the 50s and 60s if you're heading out of the state, and then if you're heading westward into the Yukon Delta, probably also looking at mid-50s to low 60s there. As we get into Friday morning, temps again in the morning will be very close to freezing, maybe a little bit milder for Utqiagvik east toward Prudhoe Bay. South central and into the middle interior, upper 40s should do the trick, about 50 in Kodiak, lower 50s for southeast, southwest temperatures in the upper 40s, Nome about 48, and highs on Friday back in the upper 50s and lower 60s for just about everywhere. North Slope temperatures could hold in the lower to mid 40s to wrap up the week.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to aviation weather now, you'll notice IFR is fairly widespread across the Bering, through Nunivak Island, and across the coastal areas of the YK Delta, all the way up into the Bering Strait and the western end of the Seward Peninsula. Also looking at some hit and miss areas of IFR, mainly along the higher terrain across southeast and up around the Yakutat region. North Slope through the Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass ranges, and then just on the south side of that as you get up into the upper Koyukuk valleys, as well as some of the far western reaches of the Kobuk and Noatak valleys. That should improve as we get into Thursday, but notice widespread IFR across the North Slope and still in the same old places across the Bering Strait, though we do see some improvement across southwestern Alaska and continued IFR across the north and western areas of the Alaska Range. Also looking for increased areas of IFR from Prince William Sound through Resurrection Bay into the Gulf of Alaska. Some improvement to VFR across the inside passages for southeast, and the higher terrain areas of IFR, that should improve, but we'll be stuck with MVFR as we get through Thursday afternoon. Another wave of low pressure is working in from the west, and so we're going to see the similar pattern play out over and over again. As we get into Friday morning, IFR continues up north. We'll continue to look at IFR conditions across the west and southwest coastal areas, as well as most of the Aleutians. Most of the northern and eastern Gulf Coast will be looking at IFR, as well as regions in Prince William Sound, and MVFR should be found at least across the northern parts of Cook Inlet. MVFR fills in across a large part of southeast. You'll see IFR developing in the afternoon for Friday for the higher terrain. MVFR for the north and eastern Gulf. IFR conditions all the way from the Yukon Delta into parts of Bristol Bay and through the central and eastern Aleutian chain. And some improvement should be noted across the North Slope, generally east of Atkasuk and Utqiagvik. Look for IFR conditions all the way out toward Kaktovik for the western regions. MVFR down through Wainwright, and with some improvement to VFR around Point Hope and Point Lay. Let's check your pass conditions for tomorrow. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass will start at IFR conditions, looking for MVFR by the afternoon, so some minor improvement there. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will move over toward IFR conditions as the day goes on. We expect similar results in Rainy Pass and for Windy Pass, expecting IFR throughout the day. Isabel Pass leaning over to IFR conditions as the afternoon goes on. Mentasta Pass should improve even further to VFR conditions. Tanita Pass, we expect to see IFR by the afternoon after an MVFR start. Portage Pass leans that way very quickly to IFR. And Chilkoot and White Pass should see some minor improvement through the afternoon with MVFR conditions developing there. Freezing levels indicate that we are expecting to see some of the coolest weather shift to the east, so that 2,000-foot freezing level drops quickly into the center sections of Yukon, with warmer weather starting to nudge up from the south. You see levels up to 6,000 feet across Fairbanks, 8,000 feet just north of Talkeetna and Anchorage, and also across the Middle Gulf levels there at 10,000 feet, which encompasses most of southeast levels there anywhere between about, I'd say, 7 to 8 to 10,000 feet in general, and levels for the Aleutians holding around 8,000 feet, with the central Bering looking at about 6,000 feet for a freezing level tomorrow morning. Icing potential, you'll have to go even higher than that, though. There is plenty of moisture. Obviously, you've seen the sky outside. But it does look like the freezing levels are even higher than that, so generally above 10,000 feet to get into that prime icing layer and above for any significant or isolated moderate icing potential. One thing to note, though, we are expecting to see shower and thunderstorm activity across the upper Kobuk and Noatak Valley into the middle and upper Yukon Valley as you go into your Thursday afternoon. So something to keep in mind. There will be convection in the area, and anytime there is convection, that implies the potential for isolated but severe icing. Here's a look at the jet stream now, and the conveyor belt of moisture coming off of eastern Asia is intact, and it is not going anywhere. 90 to 95 knots or so across the Aleutian chain into southwestern Alaska, trough across southeast and the Pacific Northwest, encouraging slightly better weather across parts of southeast, at least for right now. High pressure across the Pacific will lock this in place, and like I said, it doesn't look like it's going anywhere anytime soon. So we have a broad west and southwesterly flow feeding moisture into pretty much all of mainland Alaska. Light winds onshore for southeast, 10 to 25 knots tops. Southwesterlies across south central and southwest, 15 to 25. Westerlies coming in across the north slope, and a weak easterly flow right along the coast right now. Southwesterlies for most of the Bering Sea at 9,000 feet. You can see our ridge across southeastern Alaska, 30 to 40 knots there, and similar winds south and westerly, 10 to 20 knots for most of the mainland. Turbulence is pretty isolated there at that of the Alaska Peninsula to the central chain, below 4,000 feet for your day. Watch out for convection in the interior.
It's kind of hard to explain how important weather is to our job. I mean, it really affects everything we do.
In 2018, NOAA launches the GOES-S satellite, which takes its place in orbit as GOES-17. Working together with GOES-16, the two new geostationary weather satellites will provide constant watch over the United States and the Western Hemisphere, from the west coast of Africa all the way to New Zealand, helping monitor severe storms, wildfires, and daily weather patterns. Since its launch, NOAA's GOES-16 satellite has already demonstrated its critical capability for keeping our nation weather ready. Throughout the active 2017 hurricane season, GOES-16 delivered imagery with detail and clarity never achieved before, with 4 times greater resolution than previous NOAA satellites, and delivered this imagery faster than ever before, helping forecasters predict the path of a storm and where and when it will intensify. These accurate and timely forecasts allowed for emergency managers to prepare for evacuations, map flood areas, and save lives.
So the weather matters. The weather matters before the weather happens, and the weather matters after the event happens, because what we're able to do to prepare, allocate resources, provide information to the public through the media beforehand, and what we're able to do afterwards, how and when the waters are going to recede, so we know we can get vehicles with life-saving food and shelter equipment down a particular highway. All of that depends on the forecast.
In the GOES West position, GOES-17 will be able to provide critical data for the westernmost United States, Alaska, and Hawaii.
We're talking about getting data updates in just seconds, so we can quickly spot wildfires and closely monitor the wind direction and their intensity. The crispness of the data coming in at a faster rate will also help with fog forecasts. We can see the moment the strata starts to develop or when it starts to move out.
Like GOES-16, GOES-17 carries a suite of advanced instruments, including tools for sophisticated earth sensing, lightning detecting, solar imaging, and space weather monitoring. As an equal partner in the sky, GOES-17 will expand coverage of the advanced baseline imager technology across the Pacific Ocean, allowing meteorologists and local officials to see severe weather systems developing in real time.
So instead of seeing something, say, this large, that as you zoom in actually gets kind of blurry, you're actually going to see something that is much more detailed.
In its GOES West position, GOES-17 will be able to monitor conditions in the western U.S. like wildfires, coastal fog, and atmospheric rivers when storms from the Pacific dump heavy rain and snow over the western U.S. GOES-17 will have a major impact on fighting wildfires in California. Up-to-the-minute information and crisp detail allows forecasters to spot fires faster than ever before, even before the first 911 calls come in, and to better track and predict the path of large, dynamic, and dangerous fires.
It's amazing to see what we can get and at the level of detail and the speed that we can get the information down into the ground that makes our decision making way more accurate.
With a view of the Pacific Ocean, GOES-17 will also provide a critical eye over shipping lanes vital to the U.S. economy, protecting cargo and passenger vessels from dangerous ocean storms. GOES-17 will also provide a high-definition view over Alaska, resulting in better weather forecasts and improved monitoring of sea ice, wildfires, and volcanic ash. The advanced baseline imager on GOES-17 can distinguish between clouds, sea ice, and snow cover, a critical need during Alaska's dark, cloudy winter months. GOES 17's geostationary lightning mapper monitors lightning flashes, including the in-cloud lightning most prevalent in severe storms, helping forecasters determine when a storm is forming, intensifying, and becoming more dangerous. Thanks to GOES 17, emergency managers will be equipped with more accurate weather predictions and faster warnings, providing a real impact, saving lives, and protecting infrastructure. Watching over Earth from 22,300 miles above, GOES S will provide vital data to our weather-ready nation.
Hi, I'm JPSS. I'm a high-tech weather satellite that orbits our planet. I do something called a polar orbit. I circle the Earth from North Pole to South Pole, over and over, while the Earth spins. While I do that, I get lots of information about what's going on around the globe. I watch storms, clouds, and rain. I take the temperature of the ocean, measure air quality, ozone health, and take pictures of the land and sea. This information is used for all kinds of things. It helps us take care of our coasts and oceans and all the amazing things that live there. It helps us monitor harmful weather events like floods and droughts and measure the health of the environment. Most importantly, it helps us predict weather 3 to 7 days in the future. That means I can be a big help ahead of storms, where future warnings are important. I send information to the National Weather Service. They use the information to create forecasts. The forecasts are shared with people all over the country to help prepare for weather emergencies. So you look to the sky and wave. I'll be flying by.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time again for a look at your sea ice, and you'll notice some big changes if you were watching yesterday. The white areas are concentrations above 80%. Blue areas are marginal ice zones that are concentrations of 80% or lower. And the areas without any color on them, of course, are the open ocean. The area of high concentration ice, which could mean very thin but highly concentrated ice, or very thick but concentrated ice, is what you're seeing there in white, and you'll notice that area has shrunk considerably compared to yesterday there. So no change really that happened necessarily that fast, but a change that we were able to see better yesterday. So confidence in the analysis is considerably better than it was yesterday, and we were talking about that a little bit, I think. Along the north coast, you'll notice marginal ice now all the way from just about Demarcation Point up toward AKwx and around the bend toward Prudhoe Bay and all the way up toward Utqiagvik and eastward. North of that is where that highly concentrated ice is there, and that continues to kind of drift around with an easterly flow, fairly light. Another surge of southerly winds will be coming in here later in the week. Let's take a look at the forecast in southeast now. Light winds across the central and southern interchannels, 10 to 15 knots. Southerly flow, 20 knots with a 4-foot sea. And onshore flow, fairly light across the region from just outside of Prince William Sound down toward the Dixon entrance, 10 to 15 knots with 5 to 6-foot seas there for Friday. A stronger push from the Gulf with low pressure moving through. Looks like winds up to about 20 knots in most places from the west with 6 to 7-foot seas, and south and easterly winds across the central and southern interchannels. Southerlies across the Lynn Canal, 20 knots and 4-foot seas there. Might be a little breezy for a little while the next couple days in the north. For the Prince William Sound region, easterlies 10 knots, 2-foot seas, light winds across Cook Inlet, 10 knots there up to 3-foot seas south of Clam Gulch. Southeasterlies over the Barrens, 4 to 6-foot seas, and southerlies across the northern Gulf, 10 to 15 knots with 5-foot seas on Thursday. You'll see that broad westerly push move across the northern Gulf as well, 20 to 25, 6 to 7-foot seas there. Light winds inside of Prince William Sound, small seas as well. South and westerlies making it up past Clam Gulch, Kenai up toward the Forelands, And into the northern Cook Inlet region, 3 to 4 foot seas on that 10 to 20 knot wind. More of a westerly flow coming into Kamishak Bay and over the Barrens with 6 foot seas on a 20 knot wind for Friday. For Bristol Bay, southwesterlies 15 knots and 5 foot seas, 6 foot seas down the coast. A broad southwesterly flow moving over Kodiak Island region south to Sand Point. At about 15 knots in Shelikof Strait, you'll get 4 foot seas out of that, 7 to about 8 foot seas across the north and western Gulf and the Pacific for Thursday. For Friday, winds come up a little bit more from Perryville to Sand Point and Falls Pass, 25 knots with a 9 foot sea. Southwesterlies on either side of Kodiak Island, 20 knots, 4 to 7 foot seas there. And winds are shifting around across the Bering. Southwesterlies in Bristol Bay up to 15 knots. A southeasterly flow north of Cold Bay with a 6 foot sea there with 15 knot winds on Friday. For the chain, look for west and southwesterly winds 20 to 25, 7 to 8 foot seas expected. South of Adak and Atka, 9 foot seas there. West and southwesterlies from Adak to Kiska and Shemya, 20 knot wind, 7 foot seas on Thursday. And a little bit more of a northerly flow as the next round of low pressure moves in across the North Pacific. You'll see the winds curling in here, 15 to 20 knots. The northerly wind also feeding into the back side of that. Look for 10 foot seas between Adak and Atka and from Nikolsky to Unalaska. 15 knot winds for the Bering with generally 5 foot seas in the region on that southeast flow. For the west coast, easterlies offshore is moving through Norton Sound, 2 foot seas there. Onshore flow on either side of Nunivak Island and through Etolan Strait, 15 knots with a 15 knot wind around St. Paul and St. George, coming up to 20 knots by the end of the day. 8 foot seas expected there Thursday, down to 15 knots and 6 foot seas by Friday. A south and westerly wind moving through just south of St. Lawrence Island and into Northern Sound, 10 to 15 knots with about a 3 foot sea there. Seas might be a little bit higher north of Nunivak Island for Friday. For the North Slope, easterlies moving across the Beaufort Sea, 20 knots there. An offshore wind continues, but a little bit stronger north of Point Leyte, Wainwright. 25 knots with a 6 foot sea. Easterlies also blowing off of the Seward Peninsula. Those will reverse course as we get into Friday. A southwesterly flow there. East and northeasterly winds bending into the Bering Strait. And easterly winds a little bit stronger up around the Beaufort Sea, 15 to 20 knots, still over the ice there as we get into your Friday afternoon. A quick recap of tonight's weather. Rainfall is easing around Cordova, but flash flooding may still be possible in some isolated locations. Looks like generally, though, the flood concerns will be going away. Showers across central and northern parts of southeast, and it looks like areas of showers and fog for many parts of the interior, with low pressure across the Bering and south central once again. Rainfall will fill back in for many in south central, southwest, and into southeast again throughout your Thursday. There's a risk of showers and thunderstorms across regions in the interior, north of the Alaska Range and south of the Yukon River. Another round of rain moves into the North Pacific and the chain as we head into Friday, with showers continuing for many.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.